The escalating rhetoric from Israeli officials about imposing a Gaza reality on the West Bank has raised concerns about the intensification of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. With growing support from the Israeli right to extend the war into the West Bank, the region faces increasing threats of military action and harsh measures. This shift could severely impact security, humanitarian conditions, and broader regional stability. Palestinian leaders and the international community have expressed alarm, fearing a dramatic deterioration. Analyzing these developments is crucial to understanding the potential consequences for both the West Bank and the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Welcome to today's episode of In Depth. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently held a situation assessment meeting with senior security officials. Far-right Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich called for aggressive military operations in the West Bank, close to the destruction of Jabalia in Gaza. According to Al-Ahram, Smotrich's remarks sparked outrage, with Hamas condemning and accusing him of calling for an expansion of Israel's war of extermination. Israeli settlement construction in the West Bank has surged, with a significant number of housing units approved. This is part of a broader strategy to solidify Israel's control over the West Bank, despite international condemnation. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have intensified raids and arrests across the region, further escalating tensions in the occupied territories. For more analysis, we're joined by Mr. Ashraf Abul Hol, editorial director at Al-Ahram newspaper, and by Professor Meher Safi, political analyst from Gaza. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. I would start with Mr. Abul Hol. Sir, how do these statements reflect the current political climate in Israel, particularly among the right-wing factions?
Certainly, the statement issued from Israel between now and then around the Aradi that the far-right wing wanted to be annexed either in the West Bank or the neighboring areas, such as in Jordan. That reflects a great expansion, extremist orientation, and they are not new. As always, the far wing is repeated and shows in plans proclaiming that they are historical, that clarifies the dissemination of the Jewish people. And I think this matter is rejected internationally, regionally, and locally, as there are international resolutions, firstly related to the division and the resolution, the line the lanes on the lines of 1967, and as the Eastern Jerusalem as the main capital of the Palestinian people. So the whole land within the PLO and not Israel. Some given up around 78% of their territories, and therefore I do not think that they cannot accept to give up more of their land.
Professor Safi, how might Israel's military actions in Gaza inform potential actions in the West Bank?
mean Israel trying to repeat what happened in Gaza to be implemented in the West Bank through measures are being taken, whether they are done in the before the Tufan, the floods of Al-Aqsa, or following that, whether in the West Bank or in Jerusalem, as Israel is very much insistent to execute what they did and what they are doing up till now in Gaza, from genocide and destruction of all hospitals, or increasing the falling down of martyrs and extending the time of the war, and to be moved to another front, as did gradually in the West Bank, in camps, either in Tulkarm or in Jenin or in Qalqilia and other cities. And therefore, by all means, Israel is trying to strain the conditions and the livelihood and the life of the people in the West Bank by qualitative operations and pursuit the requested people, and by the assistance of the special forces, and it was clearly the day before yesterday and before that, and relentlessly Israel is to strain the life of the people in the West Bank and Jerusalem, and is trying by all means to annex the agricultural land and confiscate it and put the fires in the farms. So all these military operations have only one goal, is just exiting the people from their homes and their own properties and agricultural farms, not too close in the areas of settlements. They are annexing and expansion the size of settlements, as implementing old and new policies, and to escalate the time for the purpose of annexing more lands from the West Bank and make it the space less than 20% for 3 million population. Rather, what's happening of in Jerusalem and to change the demographic situation in the area in general. Therefore, Israel is trying to practice the military actions and to make more restraints for the Palestinian people, either from the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip.
Okay. Mr. Abul Hol, in what ways do Israeli leaders connect the situation in Gaza with their security strategy for the West Bank?
Certainly, the Israeli military leaders, and before them the politicians, are taking the advantage of situation in Gaza and the state the Palestinian people are going through for the annexing or moving the people from the West Bank and creating a state of besiege throughout them from each corner, so that you have to leave the Palestinian lands and to migrate, whether they are voluntarily immigration or forced migration. So the presence of the far-right leaders such as Mustrich and Bingfried and the managing what they call the Haredim use who are living in the hills and live also to hassle the Palestinian and clash and make clashes with them and confiscate their lands. They've succeeded very well in the past to make many Palestinians who are doing the agriculture in the West Bank and to leave their lands and farms, and are fortunately these people, they're doing what they call the settlement hotspots that hoping to be expanded, and day after day there will be settlement and to be confiscated again and to work for creating a new reality in the Palestinian territories that to be annexed ultimately to Israel. And we all know that throughout the years, Israel have already built several settlements in the West Bank, among which that include 10,000 of the people. And their settlers were doubled to 10 times. That will be on the count of the life of the Palestinian in the West Bank.
Professor Selfie, what are the potential responses from Palestinian leadership to these threats? How might they mobilize the public opinion?
The Palestinian Authority has a great size burden due to the Israeli practices for the authority. President Abbas should activate the diplomatic role and to deploy all the measures that are taking place in Jerusalem or the West Bank before all the friendly countries that they are acknowledged the legitimacy of the Palestinian state and the Palestinian people, and they are not in favor of the actions and deeds by the Israeli leaders. It's a great chance for President Mahmoud Abbas to employ the diplomatic affairs with a friendly country. Those are supporting the Palestinian cause and the ceasefire and intend the Palestinian cause and support the freedom of the Palestinian people and denounce all the forms of violence, killings and demolition and destruction. It is a great opportunity to change his discourse and make Israel before the whole world. It is they are the aggressors, and for the PLO, a role that is in disseminate more information about what's happening in Jerusalem of the actions of building new military and security settlements that are free from population, just only a few soldiers and agricultural settlers that should be clarified their practices by the groups of settlers that burn the lands and vehicles and pursue the Palestinian youth and kill several of Palestinians, as happened in the family in Dawab, that they were burned their properties. This matter should be documented before the human rights institutions and the European Union that was absent from the Palestinian case, probably by the pressure from the USA. Especially that the West Bank isn't in a good shape, whether from the Palestinian occupiers or through the confrontations between the Palestinian factions and the Palestinian Authority. An internal mobilization should be put in place and then to be moved to the Arab and European countries for the solidarity and support of the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian rights, and to stop the practices upon the Palestinian lands and territories.
Mr. Abul Hol, what scenarios could unfold if Israel follows through on its threats, particularly regarding the military operations in the West Bank?
In fact, the West Bank may be exposed by a great Israeli attacks, Israel is trying to silence any voice of the resistance in the West Bank. The operations that are taking place in the West Bank is creating more pain for the Israelis and increase of the probability to penetrate inside Israel. I mean, the resisted groups, and I think the Israeli attacks will be intensified in the West Bank. In general, there is already intensification in the past few months, and we found a vast operation in Naples, and it is expected to have a similar operation in different areas. But ultimately, I do not think that Israel will controlling the West Bank as its capabilities for more than 3.5 Palestinian people in the West Bank would be very limited. In particular, that they are very whelmed by military operations that is unexpected to be finished quickly. Furthermore, that they may enter in conflict with the Houthis in Yemen. So the potential, it isn't unlikely for Israel to do this, but it is certainly, it will make some operation of a storm support in the final or in ultimately these operations will be contained, could be contained.
Okay. Well, before we continue, let's take a look at the Israeli threats to impose a Gaza reality on the West Bank as this looms large, raising fears of increased isolation and violence. This potential transformation not only endangers the Palestinian communities, but also threatens to reshape the landscape of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict itself.
Israeli threats to impose a Gaza reality on the West Bank carry significant implications for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly amid rising calls from the Israeli right to expand military operations in the West Bank. This scenario suggests a potential transformation of Palestinian territories into fragmented enclaves, mirroring Gaza, where Palestinians face severe restrictions on movement and autonomy. The term Gazafication refers to the systematic confinement of Palestinians within urban areas heavily controlled by Israeli forces, eroding their rights and freedoms. While this model is already evident in Gaza, concerns are growing that similar conditions could emerge in the West Bank. Such a development would further entrench Israeli settler colonialism and diminish the prospects for a viable Palestinian state. Israeli military actions in Gaza, framed by leadership as necessary for security, appear to reflect a broader strategy aimed at reshaping the demographic and political realities of both Gaza and the West Bank. As tensions rise, right-wing factions in Israel continue to push for a more aggressive approach toward Palestinian communities in the West Bank. This rhetoric risks escalating violence and igniting widespread unrest among Palestinians, who have already endured decades of occupation and marginalization. The international community watches these developments with concern, recognizing their potential to reshape regional dynamics and exacerbate instability. The prospect of a Gaza reality in the West Bank underscores the fragility of peace efforts and highlights the urgent need for renewed dialogue to address the root causes of this enduring conflict.
Welcome back, and we're still with you. I go back to Professor Safi. Sir, how could these developments impact peace negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians? How can the negotiations move forward, taking into consideration all these developments?
From my perspective, that the cause of the setback of negotiation and in general in the peace process of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think that the U.S. administration is the main partner throughout the peace process. That it wasn't fair for give the legitimacy for the Palestinian people as they are dealing with the double standard with the Palestinian cause. Don't talks more than they take action regarding the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian rights. And we've all seen in this war that the United States of America used the veto before the ceasefires for 4 times. That increased the processes of the killing and increasing the number of martyrs in the Palestinian territories, specifically in Gaza following the 7th of October last year, by supporting Israel in finance and the arms and the military assistance. And therefore, the main dilemma and of the unsuccessful path of the Palestinian-Israeli negotiations, which is the American sponsor wasn't up to the level of responsibility, but giving the right for the Israelis vis-a-vis Palestine has a great rights and resolutions were put on the shelf of the United Nations, and none of these resolutions were implemented. The United States spoke about the two-state solutions, but never gave any evidence for their feasibility or by establishing the Palestinian state and the self-determination. Therefore, the USA is a partner of the failure of the negotiation of and a partner of what's happening in the Palestinian territories.
Mr. Abul Hol, how do these statements, I'm talking about the statements of Smotrich, reflect the broader goals of the Israeli right-wing factions?
Certainly, someone like Smotrich and the parties of the hardliners reflected the extremist religious party that do not accept by the existence and the presence of Palestine, and demanding all the historical lands should be under the Israeli control. This wing has great ambitions in the neighboring areas, but the Israelis are very aware that these ambitions aren't feasible, despite what's taking place in the current war. But this war is only limited for the Palestinians and the Israelis at large. But if Israel wishes to annex some spaces of land from Lebanon, for example, and the same will be implied for Jordan, and the conflict will be expanded. We shouldn't judge the situations of the first round, but this round and the conflict is extended. Therefore, it is impossible for Israel to achieve their ambitions. And Israel itself is very overwhelmed, and of the last wars that lost a lot and made the state is very devastated, as well as its economy. Therefore, this wing, the far right wing, isn't representing the majority, but only reflect a sector in the Israeli street, but ultimately their goals aren't going to be achieved.
Well, I'd like to thank very much my guests, Mr. Ashraf Abul Hol, editorial director in Al Ahram newspaper, and Professor Maher Safi, political analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your valuable insights. And that actually brings us to another point, which is the general footage of Trump, if possible, add footage of the United States and its role in this developments. That brings us to the end of this edition of the program. Thank you very much for joining us.